We live in a world of trial and pain. The history of every family has tragedy and suffering. This story starts with one of the poorest boys in all of England. He was fatherless, and his mother was the only comfort in his life. His lot was to braid straw into strips so others could make hats that others sold in London, then the world's largest city. He never had the advantage of a good education. As a child, he never had the benefit of high society. His mother joined the Mormon church, and he soon followed her in that conversion. That was a turning point for the young man. He went from braiding straw strips to selling milk from a cart on the street in one of London's affluent districts. One day, an unknown lady in a manor house gave the boy £3 of money sufficient for him to take passage on a ship to America. He left his mother with the promise that he would make enough money so she could join him in America. In 1864 he found himself in Salt Lake City. He immediately took whatever work he could find. He was determined to get the money so his mother could join him in the West. He developed a business in new varieties of fruit and berries. He sold trees from his nursery to communities along the front of the Wasatch Mountains. He built and managed an ice house. He sold train cars of pears and berries to the large markets of San Francisco. His family grew, his bank account increased, and his land holdings became large. By 1892 he was one of the richest men in Utah. He held positions of leadership in his church and community. On Sunday morning, July 3, 1892, George Smuin was a man of great success. He had come from one of the lowest positions in England to one of Utah's highest positions. Everything in his life was in good order. This short video deals with events that start on the evening of Sunday, July 3, and go to the evening of Thursday, July 7. In 1 minute, the life of George Smuin changed. His firstborn son died at age 18 in 1892 from drowning in the Ogden River during the 4th of July picnic. Soon after the drowning, there were 150 people looking for the body. They looked for hours without any success. Later, in the moonlight, at midnight, a dear family friend hooked the body with a grappling iron. The friend wrote an eyewitness account of this event. His account is so truthful and is word for word in the video. On the day after the drowning, the local newspaper gave a report of the death. That account is also in the video. The drowning moved the local population so that 10% of the citizens came to the boy's funeral at the Ogden Tabernacle. The band marched and played the mournful beats of a funeral procession from the tabernacle to the city cemetery. Never in the family history was there such a day of public mourning as when more than 1,000 people buried a young man who had represented the community's best hopes. This video is a sad story. Suffering and death are always necessary for rebirth. The pain from the drowning had an impact for generations on members of the Smuin family. In this story, we may seek answers to our pain and suffering. We rejoice in the family's success in America, and we mourn the loss of 3 generations that resulted from the drowning of a young man so many years ago.
A Dream and Its Fulfillment. Written by Joseph T. Johnson at the request of Apostle F. D. Richards for the juvenile instructor in about the year 1918. The afternoon services were over. As I was hitching up my horse to go to the North Ogden lime kilns, my daughter Charlotte asked to go with me to see her Aunt Mary. On the return journey, we called at Bishop George Smuin of the Lynn Ward, 5 Points. There we found the young people of the Sunday School and Mutual Improvement Association preparing for a 4th of July excursion up the famous Ogden Canyon. My daughter Lottie begged hard to accompany them, but the Spirit of the Lord impressed me most forcibly to withhold my consent, which I did in spite of tears and entreaties, even going so far as to try to induce the rest of the party to refrain from going. Sister Smuin came to the rescue at this point, and, to atone for my little girl's disappointment, invited her to go there in the morning and swim in the ice pond with the rest of the little ones. The pond was clear as crystal, safe and secluded, the private property of the bishop, and I readily consented to her being a member of the party. The 4th of July dawned bright and fair, and the canyon party set out as per programmed. During the Sunday night of July 3, I had a strange dream, the interpretation of which was withheld from me. Independence Day was celebrated with the same fervor and patriotism which characterizes Mormon celebrations, but in spite of the fact that Apostle Moses Thatcher, the prime favorite orator of his day, was in attendance at Leicester Park, my spirits could not rise to the occasion. My dream had left my mind in a kind of stupor and I was filled with dark forebodings. My wife, having a severe headache, I entertained the children on the lawn, running races for peanuts, matching them up so that all won a prize, to their great delight and satisfaction. About 7 o'clock Lottie came running in with a white terrified face. "Oh, father," she panted, "George is drowned in the Ogden River." Both brother and sister Smuin had lived at my wife's father's house before marriage. In fact, they had been married from there, so we felt we must go and do what we could to comfort them in the great sorrow that had come upon them. We arrived about 8 o'clock and found the bishop almost frantic with grief. Upon seeing me he walked up to me, crying out in his agony, "My son George is drowned in the Ogden River, he is down in the water right now, I tell you, down there right now." He was broken-hearted. That 4th of July had brought him a shock from which he never fully recovered. Placing my hand upon his shoulder I looked steadfastly into his face. The Spirit of the Lord rested upon him and he grew calmer. Silently we looked into each other's faces until he broke the deadly stillness with the words, "Don't you know I want you to go up there?" He was my friend, we loved each other and my heart was torn by his great sorrow. "George," I said, "if you will promise me one thing. I will go up there and I will get your son's body." He looked at me. All through that long summer afternoon 150 of his friends had diligently sought for that precious body. It was now bearing 10 o'clock, but still, the body had not been recovered, so as I made the promise he gazed at me. "Promise me that you will keep calm and I promise you that I will find your boy's body." "I will," he murmured, and then hastily changed into borrowed clothes. I set out with the assurance in my soul that I would not fail him. My patient old horse seemed to know the importance of the mission upon which we were engaged and set out briskly, and never shall I forget that night's work. For night was now upon us and presently the moon lent her aid, and when about 9 miles from home I met the bishop's counsellor, Brother Rasmus Christopherson, returning from his fruitless quest. All afternoon he had stood faithfully at his post and now he said to me, "Brother Johnson, I do not think you can do anything up there." "At least," I said, "I can guard the sacred spot." Then he answered, "Since that is the way you feel, I will return with you." We soon reached the spot where the boat was fastened and there we found other members of the search party. We stepped into the boat when one of our number said, "I don't think we can do anything up there tonight. It is no use going. If you have any more thoughts like that in your head," I said, "keep them to yourself. We have come up here tonight for that body and we are going to get it." At this point, 2 other brethren, named Smuin and Thomas, hailed us from the bank. They had very wisely brought grappling irons with them. We pulled to shore and held a short consultation. The excitement was intense. Just then, like a flash of lightning, my dream of the night before, with its terrible interpretation, came to me. Guided by it, I directed the movements of the company, which was now 7 in number. I reminded them that our God is a God of order, and suggested that we organize ourselves. I was offered the leadership, but, mindful of the dream, declined it, giving as my reason that I was not a member of their ward. The bishop's counselor then took the lead, and according to the dream, he called on me to pray. "Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them," were the words of our Lord when he walked this earth, and the truth of them was proven that night. At 11:50 p.m. 6 of us stepped once more into the boat. I took the hook and in secret, blessed it, and every foot of the way we went I knew we were getting nearer to the body, for, as we went, I could plainly see a shaft of golden light descending from the heavens and resting upon the waters. Then we reached the spot where the heavenly light entered the water. I knew the body was there. Directing the men to turn the boat, I said to Brother Peter Nordquist, "I will bring him up on this side." As yet, the hook had touched nothing, but the words had no sooner left my lips when I felt the iron take hold. There was another power up in the canyon that night. As soon as the brethren knew I had touched the body, they all with one accord sprang from their seats and made for the same side of the boat. Remembering my dream once more, with the hook in one hand, and the other hand raised on high, I commanded them to keep their seats. Instantly they complied and so were saved from a watery grave, for there the water was 15 to 16 feet deep. Aided by Bro. Nordquist alone, I holding the arm and he the foot, while the others rowed, the boat was brought safely to shore, the boat with its precious burden, and the body was laid upon the bank. For a moment we all stood in silent awe with heads bent, and then clear on the night air rang the strokes of the town clock, chiming the midnight hour. 10 minutes from the time we had unitedly appealed to our God, our prayer was answered and we started home with our sacred, precious burden, reverently covered with quilts. Arriving at Billy Wilson's we phoned the sad but thankful news that success had crowned our efforts and ere long reached the home of his heartbroken parents. Thus was every part of my dream fulfilled, even to the discarding of the never-to-be-used-again bathing suit. Having done all that human power could do for a suffering, sorrowing, well-loved friend, we returned home, arriving about 5 o'clock in the morning. That was the greatest night's work ever accomplished, and I ever thank God for the vision of it. I know that God can lead his servants by night as well as by day, on the water as well as on the land. Members of that night company are still living who can bear testimony of that night's work, but the vision was given alone to me. I am 72 years old and have written this from memory. Joseph T. Johnson, 1237 Porter Avenue, Ogden, Utah.
George Joseph Smuin, age 18, son of Bishop George Smuin of Lynn, while in bathing in Ogden River yesterday afternoon, was suddenly seized with cramps and before aid could reach him, sunk to the bottom and was drowned. The good people of Lynn celebrated the glorious Fourth in many different ways, but the most popular enjoyment was a driving tour through Ogden Canyon. By dawn the road leading to the canyon was lined with vehicles filled with merry crowds of young, middle-aged and old people, none of whom were more happy than a party of 16 young ladies and gentlemen, among whom were Ellen, Rose, Susie, and George Smuin, David Gaisford, Joseph Hutchins, and Fred Romrell. Long before the noon hour, the proposed camping grounds, near Reary's Ranch, were reached, and the party divided up into small companies. Some fished while others stayed in camp and read or strolled away, as is the custom among young people on pleasure bent. About 8 o'clock nearly all of the picnickers were gathered around the camp when someone proposed taking a swim in the river. As a large number of bathers had been observed during the day at different points on the river, no one thought of the danger attending such action, and the move was heartily seconded by the gentlemen. Inasmuch as no bathing suits had been taken on the trip, those who desire a bath were in a quandary where to obtain something which would answer the purpose. Suddenly a brilliant idea entered the head of young Smuin, and he straightway proceeded to put it into execution. Taking a large burlap sack, he cut a place for his head and arms, and retiring to an improvised bath-house he slipped on the bathing suit, saying as he did so that as there was only one suit to be divided among so many they must take turns, and he would be the first to try it. The water where the young man entered was very deep but so clear that in most places the bottom could be seen. Smuin stuck out boldly and seemed to enjoy himself after the first chill, but suddenly he was seized with cramps and after giving utterance to several cries for help, he sank to the bottom. Hutchins and Romrell sprang into the water to aid their comrade, but the intense, icy cold gave them the cramps and they returned to the river bank with much difficulty. What makes the death seem more shocking was that it was witnessed by the boy's 3 sisters and many of his old playmates and associates, who were powerless to aid, and could only stand by and see him meet his fate. It was indeed a sad party returning home. Immediately the Lynn Ward organized several searching parties, and last night men in boats dragged the river. 2 o'clock this morning the searchers reached Lynn with the body which had been found lodged among the willows. The members of the bereaved family are heartbroken, and the father refuses to be comforted. Undertaker Larkin immediately went out and took charge of the body,